common sense ain't that common anymore. Seems common sense is past tense, just like the dinosaur. Political correctness has got a lot to answer for, 'cause common sense ain't that common anymore.
Now on weekends, the Treasury of Common Sense.
Yeah, we love it to have a chat with Leith Van Onselen on a Saturday morning. He joins us from macrobusiness.com.au. He's chief economist at the MB Fund. All right, well, let's get into things. You say we've reached the end of affordable housing in Australia. Gee, that's a thing to say.
Yeah, it is. Well, I mean, unfortunately, it's sort of based on two excellent reports that were released this week by Cotality and PropTrack. They both released separate affordability reports, and they're based on different ways of measuring it, but they both painted an absolutely bleak picture, unfortunately. Whether you're looking to purchase a home or rent a home, it was very bleak. So, Cotality showed that the typical home in Australia is now valued at 8.2 times household incomes, which is up from about 6.4 times incomes 5 years ago. So it's pretty bad. It's a record high level.
Gee.
Sydney, to nobody's surprise, is the nation's most expensive market. So the house price to income ratio in Sydney now is 10. That's up from 8.2 5 years ago. And Brisbane has surged. So Brisbane used to be 5 years ago was very affordable nationally. Now it's one of the most unaffordable markets. So the house price to income ratio there is 8.8 as of the September quarter, and that's up from 5.5 5 years ago. Now, PropTrack did a different measurement. They basically tried to work out what percentage of homes is affordable based on a household spending 30% or less of their income on mortgage repayments. And they found that only 15% of homes sold last financial year nationally were deemed affordable if you want to spend 30% or less. New South Wales, to nobody's surprise, least affordable state, only 11% of them of households earning the median income could afford a home last year. Queensland was marginally better, only 14% of homes were affordable to the median income household, and reflecting the fact that interest rates are a lot higher and prices have gone up than they were 5 years ago. Cotality also showed that for a median income household purchasing a new home across the nation, they need to spend 45% of their incomes on just to service the mortgage.
Wow.
That's up from about 26% 5 years ago. In Sydney, they have to spend nearly 55% of their income, up from about 33% 5 years ago. And in Brisbane, 48% of their income to service a new mortgage. This is for the median income household, up from 22%. Now, the situation, unfortunately, if you're looking to purchase a home, is probably going to get worse in the next year, because SQM Research, they also release their boom to bust reports. So they basically do annual price growth forecasts for the next year. And, Louis Christopher, who runs that's one of the smartest guys in this area. And he is, he's been one of the most accurate forecasters in the country over a long period of time. And he forecasts that the capital city average home price is going to rise by between 6 and 10% next year. Now, that's obviously higher than income growth. Yeah. And with the Reserve Bank not expected to cut rates much, it just means this affordability to purchase is just going to get worse. But the whole picture, if you're a renter, is also stinks, because at the national level, Totality reported that average rents have surged by 43% in the past 5 years. And what that means, Luke, is that if you're the typical Australian renter is now paying $10,600 more annually to rent a dwelling than they were 5 years ago.
$10,600 more?
That's right, than they would have 5 years ago.
Wow.
If you have to take out a new rental, so it's based on advertised rents.
Yes.
So if you're taking out a new rental today versus taking out a new rental 5 years ago, you'd be paying $10,600 more nationally. And as a result, the percentage of income required to meet rental payments on a median home has surged to 33.5%, which is up from about 26% 5 years ago. So that's a lot worse. And now Sydney's advertised rents have risen by 42% over the past 5 years. And if you're a typical Sydney-sider, a renter, and you're looking to rent a home now versus 5 years ago, you need $12,300 more to service that rent than you did 5 years ago. And in Brisbane rents have soared by 47%, over 5 years. And if you're a typical Brisbane renter, you need to spend $11,600 more to rent a dwelling now, the median dwelling now, than you would have 5 years ago.
Jeez.
So this is just an absolute disaster. And unfortunately, the whole rental thing the rental situation looks like it's going to get worse as well, because according to Cotality, the rental vacancy rates fallen to a record low in October.
Yeah.
And advertised rents are now rising fairly quickly again. After sort of falling, stabilising a bit last year, they're now rising again because the rental vacancy rate's fallen. So that just means that rents are going to become less affordable as well. So it's a very bleak reports here from Cotality and PropTrack, unfortunately.
Yeah, wow. All right, so this week we find ourselves with it would appear, Leith, we've found ourselves with a clown.
Yeah, so it's a returning clown. Just like last week, we had I think it was Jim Chalmers returning. Now
Yep.
this week it's Climate Minister Chris Bowen.
Oh,
So yeah, absolutely. So listeners probably recall that before the 2022 election, Labor promised that our power bills would fall by $275 under its renewable energy push by 2025, which is this year. Now, despite the fact that they've spent $5 billion in energy subsidies, which is, of course, paid for by us, we're basically paying ourselves to subsidise energy costs. We've all seen our bills go up, right? So we didn't get the $275 reduction. We got a big rise. Now, last week, Chris Bowen fronted the COP31 climate conference, trying to spruik South Australia as to host the COP. They obviously failed. But what he did was he actually boasted that he praised South Australia for being, quote, the Denmark down under, for delivering, quote, clean, reliable, secure and affordable energy. Well, the bit that Bowen missed about South Australia is it actually has the highest retail electricity prices in Australia. So it's about 75% wind and solar, right, which they often boast about, but it's got the most expensive power costs in Australia. Now, he also missed the bit about Denmark having one of the most expensive energy systems in the world thanks to its high wind and solar. So Denmark's electricity prices are about 2.7 times the world's average,
right,
and 1.8 times Europe's average, right? So he's kind of missed the mark there a little bit, I would have thought, but it gets worse. So Bowen then fronted ABC 7:30 report this week, where presenter Sarah Ferguson asked him whether the rollout of all these renewables are going to lower power bills, and which he replied an emphatic yes, they will. And Bowen claimed that, all the evidence says that renewables are the cheapest form of energy. The faster and better we get the renewable energy rolled out, the cheaper bills will be, which is what he said. So here's a memo to Chris Bowen. Just because you repeat a lie often enough doesn't make the lie true. And the cold hard reality is that if you plot, and people have done this, they've actually plotted energy prices globally with on the vertical axis the price, the horizontal axis the share of wind and solar. And what it shows is that the price of electricity rises at a 45-degree angle as the share of wind and solar rises. So the actual empirical evidence shows that wind and solar power are expensive, and they're expensive because they need masses of transmission, like heaps of power poles, wires, transformers, all those sorts of things. They need heaps of storage from batteries and pumped hydro and all this stuff. They need heaps of other things to make them work, and that stuff is uber expensive.
Yeah.
And as a result, that stuff, all these extra costs get fed into your electricity bills, which is why there's not a single nation on earth that has a very high share of wind and solar that has cheap power. It just doesn't exist.
Mate.
I just wish Chris Bowen would be honest here, Luke.
Yes.
And just admit that if they want to do this sort of stuff, they've got to say, look, your bills are going to go up, but here's why it's worth it for X, Y, and Z reason. But instead, they just lie to us. 1,000%
correct. And one of the other things that came to light today, courtesy of Chris Uhlmann in the Oz, he says the nation's East Coast energy transition blueprint significantly underestimates how severe future wind droughts could be, in a critical flaw that casts doubt on whether a weather-dependent grid can keep the lights on, according to a forensic analysis. Now, this was done by a group, Global Power Energy, whose 15-strong leadership team has more than 400 years of combined technical, regulatory and commercial experience across generation. Now, what they're saying is that there will be wind droughts, and that some of the forecasts by AEMO are way off the mark. They're not saying to say we shouldn't be doing wind. They support wind. But they're saying that the analysis from AEMO and others, and look, mate, so I make that point. The other point I make is that it appears to me that we've got government policy cheer squads masquerading as technical experts in government departments, and I haven't closed the circle yet, but I'm not far off it. There aren't there, key bodies in all of this who confirm government policy because that's effectively all they do. They don't look at alternatives. They aren't asked to cost this or take into account that. So they end up with a politician like, for example, a clown in the parliament saying, but the CSIRO said this, or AEMO said this, or the Climate Council say this. But it's just a pat on the back-a-thon. There's no critical analysis, is there?
100%. It's all tail wagging the dog, right?
Yeah.
So you have all these groups who only exist to push this stuff. So, of course, they're going to push it because that's their only reason to exist. And then you have the CSIRO and AEMO who've basically written reports around meeting Labor's 82% renewable energy target. And so that was the target. So they had to write reports to meet that target. So as a result, you get stuff supporting policy to meet that target because the target is the endpoint. Like the whole thing is just a joke. And on your point about wind droughts, of course we're going to have wind droughts. We have them every winter, especially. And in Germany, they've got a name for it. They call it Dunkelflaute. And it's basically when you have very low sun output, solar output, because it's winter, and then you also have wind droughts. So it's the worst of both worlds. And we have these regularly in winter, especially down south where I live, in Victoria, because you have short, cloudy, overcast days, and you can have days with very little wind, which goes right up the east coast.
Yeah.
And you cannot run an energy system based on intermittent power sources that you have zero control of, which is why you need to spend all these billions upon billions of dollars on backup generation, on massive amounts of storage and all this sort of stuff, because energy has to be available on demand.
Yes.
And you can't do that with an intermittent system. So you need to spend uber amounts of all this other stuff, which makes the whole system incredibly expensive. It's as simple as that.
Yeah. Good on you, mate. Talk to you next week.
Thanks, Luke.
Thank you, Leith Van Onselen. And the other part of that is with your wind turbine, you've got to hope you got one that doesn't have the asbestos.
Big